to have good bandwidth. Um, Apart from that, if you have any queries, please put them in the chat box and we will address them at regular intervals during the course of the webinar. Having said that, I would like to now begin. I'm sorry. Yeah. Back in March 2019, we at CFI conducted an in-depth research study.
Can't see your screen.
We wanted to find out what it takes to increase representation of women in leadership. We surveyed over 30 women across various ages and stages of their career trajectory. And what we found is that a large proportion of women tend to drop out of the leadership pipeline at various stages, right from the entry level to mid-level.
Can't see your screen, Vaishnavi.
Visible.
It's visible, right?
Yeah, it's visible to me.
It's visible.
Yeah.
Can the others see it?
Yeah, can see it.
Yes,
All
yes,
right.
we can.
Yeah,
Yes.
yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We tried to find out the reasons for this, and we identified various factors which could broadly be categorized under 3 layers. The pull factors or competing personal commitments at home, push factors or organizational biases, prejudices, and policies which were not keeping the realities of women in mind. And finally, hardwired belief systems which society at large had internalized about gender roles. We also realized that each of these layers operated at different stages of the leadership trajectory of a woman. For instance, at entry level, some of the policies might be holding them back. Friendly policies help women to cross that. And then at mid to senior level, some of the competing personal commitments might get in the way. They set up support systems and they're able to overcome that. However, a lot has changed since March 2019. Today, the world as we know it has changed. And we find that in the post-COVID era, all 3 layers are simultaneously at play and impact women across ages and stages of the leadership pipeline. The pull factors, the push factors, and the belief systems are all fully at play. Having said that, we have also heard that COVID has created a lot of opportunities for women. The remote working arrangement has thrown up certain opportunities which perhaps they might not have had earlier. Similarly, it's created a lot of flexibility. Moreover, most importantly, because men and the family at large are now at close quarters and are closely seeing the challenges that women face, it has created more sensitivity and therefore it has acted as an equalizer. We wanted to find out, is COVID truly an equalizer or an aggravator? So we conducted yet another research study, since it's what we do best. And we surveyed 35 people from a cross-section, from a large cross-section. A majority of respondents felt that COVID has, in fact, had an adverse impact on women at the workplace. 77% of our participants felt that it's had an adverse impact. Some of the ways in which it's impacted is first and foremost in terms of blurring the lines between work and life. Work and life are now practically in the same physical space. There is no cutoff time. There are extended working hours. You don't know when work ends and life begins, and vice versa. And then household work. A lot of household chores have really increased because of the lack of breakdown of support systems. No maids, children are at home, elder care has piled up. And then there is an unequal distribution of all this work and the burden falls more on women. Schooling is also online and it doesn't engage children as much. So women have to be more involved and engage them. Making an impact at work has also been raised as one of the challenges. Because even Before COVID, women were finding it hard to assert themselves, to create visibility for their contribution. And now this remote working arrangement has only aggravated this challenge. An uncertain future regarding job security for themselves, their spouse, and last but certainly not the least, challenges in terms of
Hello?
well-being.
Hello. Hi. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
And finally,
Last night I
challenge.
couldn't sleep.
Yeah, I request you to please keep yourselves on mute. Yeah. And finally, in terms of well-being, domestic violence and the mental and psychological impact that the pandemic has had. These are some of the challenges that were shared. However, more than answers, the survey that we conducted raised a lot of questions. People had a lot of questions. Men and women alike had a lot of questions. And we thought, who better to answer these questions than our very own Nirmala Menon. Nirmala Menon is the CEO and founder of Interweave Consulting Private Limited. Nirmala and her team at Interweave work with several marquee organizations across industries as a one-stop shop for organizational diversity and inclusion solutions. As founder and CEO of Interweave, her contribution in the field has been recognized with her being listed among the top 50 diversity professionals in the global diversity list. Prior to Interweave, she was the diversity and employee relations leader for IBM India. Her stint as part of IBM's global diversity team provided her international experience in embedding IBM's diversity philosophy and practices across countries in APAC, Ireland, Canada, Mexico, and US. Nirmala Menon is also associated with industry bodies like NASSCOM, CII, NHRD, SHRM as a subject matter expert. She's a representative in the Informal International Advisory Group of UN Global Compact and the UNIFEM to formulate the Women's Empowerment Principles. She's a certified corporate director from the Institute of Directors and a certified coach from the International Coaching Academy. She also has a master's in business from XLRI and an MS from Temple University. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us. We're so grateful to have you here with us, and I'm sure that we'll all learn a lot from you on this most important topic.
My pleasure to be here, Vaishnavi.
Thank you. We're also very happy to share that Ruby Thapar, Senior CFI Coach, has kindly agreed to moderate this morning's webinar. Ruby, thank you so much for joining us. Ruby is an independent reputation, branding, crisis, and sustainability strategist with over 25 years of experience. She's also an executive coach certified by CFI. She's worked with the likes of Aditya Birla Group and Vedanta Group in various capacities. She has, in her earlier role, she was the Director of Corporate Affairs at Dow Chemicals International. Currently, she is an independent director and adjunct consultant CSR and sustainability at the Conference Board. Thank you, Ruby, for agreeing to moderate this morning's session.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And I'm very excited to talk to Nimi.
Great. Over to Ruby and Nirmala to kickstart the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Vaishnavi. Nimi, I think I'll pick up from the research that Vaishnavi shared, Seems like some things are back on the drawing table. Work-life balance, largely being raised by women, self-esteem, questions around self-esteem with added roles and responsibilities, and really no help around it. And lastly, the tilt and the assumption that both housework, childcare, elderly care seems to rest in the domain of women. And I'm really pondering, have things really changed? Or are we still where we were many, many decades back?
Okay. Great question, Ruby. And let me start by saying that inequality is not a new issue. It has existed and, the world has always been skewed against women, and it will continue to exist if it's not course corrected. What the pandemic has really done is to kind of shine a light on the inequalities. Now we are seeing it up close. And there's a lot of public discourse on the personal challenges that women are facing. We've never had this kind of a conversation before. Right? So to that extent, it's really shone the light. Now, women have always carried the higher burden of home and childcare, emotional support, etc., around the world. And it's very important work, but it's generally been unpaid work. Women have done this, free of cost in a sense, right? And even if it's professional work, it has always been seen as not very valuable and paid less than male-dominated jobs. So in a sense, women have always had a raw deal. Nowhere in the world have women kind of overtaken men and, kind of made the rules and done things with, the kind of freedom that men have typically had. And I think that's important for us to realize. And this pandemic is actually giving us an opportunity to think about this and change the skewed dynamics, since it's existed. I mean, it's been handed over to us from, its legacy, right? It's been there for centuries. Now, how are we going to correct it? We had started on this work much before the pandemic, and the pandemic has come at a right moment where, the conversation is just getting louder and stronger. And I think it's probably a turning point for a lot of the conversations.
Yeah, so while, while it seems, you're right, while it seems like an opportunity, I mean, if just to dig a little, take few steps backward, what has kept us from making this progress? It seems like 5 steps forward and 10 steps behind, like we have been push and pull, around this issue. So what do you think are some of the hindrances or factors that have not really helped us take this leap, which so deserves it, this conversation?
I agree. And everybody talks about gender equality and people are very well intended. The intent is to ensure equality, right? I mean, all of those good intent is very much in place. But what I feel, having worked in this space, is that we don't understand inequality, right? I mean, I have people that will point out to say, women are working outside the homes, they're driving cars, planes, they are in combat missions. So it's mission accomplished. Right? It's all done. Women have equal opportunity. So if women aren't rising, even if women aren't doing things, it's because they're not aspiring to. They're choosing not to. Right? So that's the way they look at it. Now, letting people know that is not the lived reality. The lived reality is very, very different. Just because there are a few women out there, it does not mean things have changed for everyone. Right? A large majority of women are still struggling with it. And that's really what the pandemic has shown. Now you're suddenly seeing senior leaders, men and women have families. They have dogs, they have children that come up in video shows and, video conversations, etc.
Yeah.
We're suddenly realizing you're seeing them in a context and not just as the professionals that we've known them to be, which in a sense is humanizing all of us. And it's letting us know that we are all living very similar lives. And, and it's clearly not a secret anymore. I mean, it never was. But it's really upfront for you to see that women have really been carrying the larger brunt of things. And like Vaishnavi pointed out, there is no house help. We're not getting the grandparents in because of COVID fear, the children, it's safer for them to be away. So perforce, men are seeing what's going on in the house and they can't ignore it anymore. They're not walking out of the house, right? So they're seeing it. And I think there is, an empathy to what's really going on. And what women have so beautifully handled so far is suddenly out there for us to see.
Yeah, I think you made very interesting point that we don't understand the concept of inequality. The fact that you've educated, you can step out, you can wear what you want, you can party, somehow seems to be equated. And it would be an interesting thing to take forward as to how do you define. And secondly, humanizing. Your leader is not who you are. Your identity is first as a human being. I think absolutely wonderful points there. And I want to jump a question. I will come back to the men in a bit. But I think you brought up another valid point. The pandemic has put everything on the table. There is no invisible conversations anymore. It is no longer posturing about gender equality. It is no longer stereotype. You're actually modeling it's in your face for everybody to see. Suddenly Absolutely. It has, and let's not waste a good crisis. So here is everything's, the buffet is laid out on every single aspect that we have never even wanted to address, in terms of cultures of family, stereotyping, how are you in the office, at work, because you're watching everything, there is no separation between home and work. And, and gender difference, a lot of research has said this is a learned behavior. It is not something that we are born with. We've learned how to be, how to treat differently. So my question is that how can we use this opportunity to socialize and children? I think the other interesting piece is that you have told children, we have given them value that you are equal, but right now they're watching you, your behavior, and I think actions speak louder than words. How can we socialize men, women, and children on gender parity and, leverage this very unique landscape that is now available to us?
Absolutely, bang on. In fact, this is a very, very unique opportunity, and I really, really hope that we don't miss it, both as adults and individuals in our own rights, as well as organizations and the government. It's a great watershed moment to make that change, right? Like you said, this is an opportunity for the children to see up close. And if both the parents are at home and they are cooking, cleaning, caring, etc., it really is far more, stronger a message than, calling it out from, how many ever lectures you attend, it's never going to be the same, right? The fact that you're actually seeing it up close and in action clearly will make the difference for the next generation. Already there are conversations around this, and I think the new generation is changing a little bit more. And with this, pandemic, and since it's existed for almost 6 months, in a sense, it's becoming a norm in homes where parents are, pitching in equally. And it's a little bit more, I would imagine, in families where the women are, the frontline warriors, as we call them, in the healthcare, the nurses, etc. And the large number of women in that sector, where the men are left handling the baby, so to say, literally, right? They're managing the homes and all of that. And research around this says that even when there are short stints or windows where men participate in home matters as an equal partner, it actually makes a substantial difference to them going forward. So I think this pandemic is offering us that opportunity, and I think we really shouldn't miss it. Very, very important to be raising our boys and girls, not to be necessarily ladies and gentlemen, but to be calm, respectful, caring, kind individuals. I think that's really what is very urgently needed in the world, more than men and women. So I think this is a great opportunity for everybody to jump in and do this more intentionally, because left to ourselves, without thinking about this, it may not really happen because there's just so many influences, but this is a great opportunity.
Yeah, and I, as a woman, I feel that, and I'll tell you an incident. There was this team member, in my team when I was in a full-time job, 30 something, and very independent, very forward-looking, had very ambitious. And once we went out and her husband joined us, and suddenly I found her, puttering around her husband and putting his collar straight. And it was an interesting experience for me to watch this. Like, they were two very different people. So we've been so conditioned even as women, and why blame the men only? You very naturally will tell your girls to wash the vessel and the boys to pick maybe heavy weight or something like this. And how does one socialize? How do you break this conditioning? Especially in an opportunity. Otherwise, we're seeking the opportunity, we're fighting for it, and here it is there. How do you use it, and how do you leverage this? If you could throw some research, something from your experience, it would really, make it real for people that it's not theoretical conversation, but it happens.
Yeah, I think it's how frequently you have those conversations. Right? As you were talking about this, I was just recalling 2 days ago, I was on a webinar with a group of senior leaders, and the whole thing was on reflection, what is going on right now, kind of a thing. And he came up with a very interesting thing. He said, look, now because it's COVID, I'm watching a lot of movies with my family because I'm not going out very much. I'm watching a lot of movies with my families. And one of the things that we have seen as a family, and we've discussed this internally, my son and my daughter, is how women are portrayed in films. He says how it used to be 10 years ago. Now, those are progressive conversations, really, right? So it's about bringing it up, laying it on the table, and discussing it itself is progress. Because you can have laws, you can have policies, you can have everything in the world, which are all easy to do, but changing mindsets is the hardest. And that's a long transformational job, and it takes a lot of effort and multiple levers to move. And every single one of us has an opportunity in some way or the other. I work in this space, and it's often sometimes when I'm with my friends, they will joke about, hey, be careful, Nimi is here, she's going to say something about this. I never miss an opportunity. I'll point it out. I say, guys, just look at it this way as well. So all of these are moments where you can show a perspective. It may change them, it may not change them, but eventually it will. And that's the only thing that will change as well.
Yeah, I think conversations and dialogues are so powerful there.
Yeah.
And I think I saw a question pop up and I got a bit distracted there, but it was about, is this an international phenomena? And in my working in international organizations, I found women across the board face the same issue. Do you have any perspective on that?
I agree completely. It's across the board. It's a little worse for India, I would imagine, because, we have a lot more dependencies. In the West, for example, in my experience, I've lived and worked there. I can say that, when a family is making a decision, it's primarily the husband and wife that's making the decision. In India, I have seen the in-laws and the extended family also playing a role in whether she should work, not work. How many hours should she work? Is it going to be a job that will take her too far from the home? Multiple things. So all of this plays a role. And I think that influence is stronger for Indian women compared to the West. But otherwise, women face very, very similar challenges.
Yeah, and I think, it is similar. But in India, there are, like you said, there are so many factors which come into play here. And you can't shy away from them. They're reality. And it's such a complex issue.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
Also, if I'm just going to stay on this, this geography issue, even in India, there are many Indias. And this is my personal experience that, and this applies to both men and women, I think, not just the women here, but the tribal communities of our country are extremely empowered. I think women know their mind. There is parity in terms of smoking, drinking, and financial decisions. I find the rural women, when you come to the villages, wise. I've worked in the rural belts of this country, and I found them to be very wise because they like their freedom. So they always play for win-win, and they will enroll the men folks around it. But it is the middle class. It's the urban woman who gets so stuck, and men. I think it's both ways. In spite of such higher education, holding excellent jobs, we're still stuck somewhere. And I think in a lot of the women in the corporate world whom we did this survey with threw up those issues to us. Yeah. How would you, any perspective on that would be really great.
Yeah. See, I think when you look at the lowest strata of society, that you're talking about in terms of people that are, need a livelihood, they have to work and they're empowered economically. They're looking for their own food. They're not depending on their husbands because many of them drink and, don't support the home, et cetera, et cetera. So they have that economic independence. Economic independence is a very big deal to make you feel confident and competent in what you're doing. And that has been often denied. I mean, if you really look at how women have come into the workplace and, how, it was seen as a trophy thing that your wife is not working, I can take care. It's that whole concept of what masculinity is, right? It's about me being able to take care and protect my woman, and she shouldn't work. I should keep her caged, etc. Has been traditional. I mean, I'm not going into all of that a whole lot. And that's primarily been with the middle class and slightly the upper middle class kind of conversations, right? And women typically have not had too much leeway to make mistakes. It's like your boys can be boys. They can make a few mistakes, correct themselves and move on because they're encouraged to do that. Women are constantly told, stay within the lines, stay within the lines, So there is that conditioning, and that conditioning is very, very hard for you to get over. Like if I were to look at myself even, from the, I'm close to 60 now, and the way I was raised, when I was being raised, it was extremely important for me to study because my family valued education. They said, you must be a really good student. And I was questioned if I didn't do well, but there was never a conversation that I had to bring bread to the table. I was being educated in a sense because, if something happened to my husband, you will be able to take care of the family. I was like an insurance plan. My education was an insurance plan. So yeah, in a sense, you will be able to care for the children. So, and I wonder, how did this impact me as an individual, as a professional? I have always done good work. And if I didn't enjoy what I was doing, if it was a little bothersome, it felt easy for me to quit my job. I didn't have to give anybody explanations. You know what I'm saying? So that need to stay in the workforce was not very strong. But that has definitely changed. That has definitely changed today. And my daughter, for example, when I hear her talking, I don't see her thinking about her future life without a job. So I think even in that one generation, there's been a lot of change. But for a lot of young women that are out in the workplace today, they are first generation working women, you know, in a corporate job. Otherwise, their parents have been teachers or, you know, in the healthcare business, etc., industry, etc. They haven't really seen what it is to be in the corporate world, many of them. So they're learning for the first time. And when it gets really hard for them, they reach out to their parents, you know, mother, or even their fathers many times. And I've seen this with fathers as well, who are encouraging their kids to do engineering and, you know, do this, do that, etc. And they've done all of this. And then one fine day, the father says, hey, we have to get you married. And she says, no, dad, I'm not interested. And the father is like, no, that's my duty. I have to do this for you. Right? So it's that whole concept of, are we really letting our women, our girls have the same freedom that men have? Giving them the same opportunities. And when I say this, it's not just for the women, it's also for men, right? Are we allowing our men to stay at home if they want to? If they're good house husbands, are we letting them be? We are not, right? It's like, okay, you're a man, you go to work. You don't have a choice and you will work all your life, right? So it's a very complex system that we have built up over the years, and both men and women need to work around this to redefine it. And that's going to happen slowly. It's beginning to happen, but we have a long, long way to go.
Yeah, but I'm so glad that at least steps, and we can now have these kind of conversations, you know, which is a huge step forward, and so openly, you know, and you know, which earlier was not there. So you know, when you spoke about it, I remembered my own, when I came back frustrated from work, and every time I came, my father would say, leave, stay at home, you know. It was not really like you were putting the bread and butter, you were more like entertaining yourself, you know.
And you're so right. I mean, there's a term in, you know, that's called benevolent sexism.
True.
It's so kind to you that you don't even realize it. And we have done that so beautifully. I mean, when I was growing up, for example, I was told, as a woman, you must be the light of the house. You should ensure peace in the house. Nobody should be upset. Everybody has to be happy. Those are not goals that any woman can really manage, right? Along with 20 other things, right? I mean, so it's very, very hard stuff that's put on women. And it's all said so nicely that you think, oh, wow, this is so wonderful to be that way. And that whole self-sacrificing piece is just built into women over the years.
Yeah, and there have been pockets of exception. And I remember this friend of mine, this couple, and both of them bankers, very high profile job, doing extremely well for themselves. And one kid whom the, you know, grandmother helped out, and then they realized that we need to look after our own child. So it was a very conscious decision that whoever was earning more money would work, whether it was the wife or the husband, it did not matter. And the rest the other person would stay at home and, you know, look after the kid. I mean, as it had that the man was earning more money, so he chose to go to work and the wife stayed at home. But the cooking was shared. They would fight because for both of them, it was de-stress. And it was like music to my ears 15, 20 years back to, believe that there is a couple like this. Yeah. And I want to, the conditioning of men and women. And I feel sometimes when I read an article about this man writing I think it was in the Guardian or something, where he said, I would like to stay at home. Can my wife go to work? And he really didn't have the choice because his wife had made a decision to stay at home. And, he was thought that he would put the bread on the table and he wanted to tend the garden and bring up the children. And it's sad sometimes men don't have those opportunities available for them. And on that, sorry, go ahead.
I agree. And, I think women need to give men that opportunity as well, right? I mean, women have also been raised to, just very, very recently, about 2 months ago, I ran into a young college girl. She's doing her MBA. And she was graduating that year and she was talking about her job. And in the course of conversation today, it's very acceptable to ask, are you seeing somebody? Are you dating someone? And she said, yes, I am. And, so I said, okay, is that serious? And she said, not really. I really would like to get married to somebody from a better institute. And I'm like, okay. So what are you saying? Says, oh, I'm from a second-tier institute. I really would like to get married to somebody from an IIM or a better institute, a first year. So it hasn't changed. I mean, this is 2 months ago, right? Yeah. So what are we saying? We're signing up to inequality right from the start, right? Men and women, and it becomes very uncomfortable. You ask young girls, are you comfortable with a man who's not as educated as you? Are you happy with a good man or do you want a successful man? the chances are, because that's so ingrained in this whole
True.
thing of, a man has to be ambitious, brave, strong, courageous, successful, so many things that, women don't want to be with somebody who's different either.
True.
So for people that are crossing this line that society has drawn, it takes a lot of courage. It's not easy.
It's not easy. And I think hats off to all those who made the effort to do that. And that's why I think, I don't think we are, stepping into big shoes. I think we've got an raised platform to stand on, and what we can see a nice garden which is already built. Now the question is, how are we going to tend it? How are we going to contribute to it? And I want to stay back and be very fair to the men and come back. The pandemic has not been easy for men as well. I think suddenly new roles are demanded, new sensitivities are demanded, both at home and at work, from them. Any thoughts for them, and how can we be nice to them, be more collaborative?
I think the men have always had a very hard time, but they never recognized it. Yeah, it's time for them to change as well. Right? So we've put that whole burden of you have to be a lifelong provider. Economically, everybody's dependent on you. You watch the finances, you do this, you do that. And it's there. And, again, we put it very nicely, you are the boss of the house kind of a thing. But it's a strain and it's a stress. And in that context, if you look at the pandemic, it's put on some very strong stressors on men. The whole insecurity that Vaishnavi talked about in her presentation, that both men and women fear. I think it's a lot more for men than it is for women, right? A job loss is not just losing a job, it's losing your identity as a man, because you somehow associated a man's status with the designation that you carry at work, right? So it's loss of face, it's loss of just too many things. And that can be extremely stressful. Then you're fearing, am I doing well at work? I don't know, this whole concept of working from home and on a computer, etc., etc. It's putting its own stressors on men. True. And then you are also seeing up close that you cannot walk away from a crying child. Your wife is in the restroom, you have to step up and go pick up that child or care for an elder parent. Multiple things which are so alien to many of them. Now, when I say alien, it's not that men are bad people. They've really tried their best. I mean, they have many husbands do support their wives in a lot of ways. They kind of, but it's always been, I'm helping out. It's never been to take accountability for it.
True.
And I am seeing that changing a little bit now. What we in management call completed staff work for anything that you do is beginning to happen with men doing household work, for example. Earlier, if you made dosa, you just, put the batter on the tawa and you walked away saying, I made dosas today. And then you'll take a few pictures and put it on Facebook or whatever, which is all fine. I'm good with all of that. As long as people are participating and learning, it's absolutely fine. But today they are also saying, okay, the pan has to be washed, the buttons have to be put in the sink, or, all of that is also beginning to happen. So I think that's the shift that I am seeing and hearing from people that I'm speaking with, that more men are contributing as well. And that's good. It's very good, because for the longest time, we've always thought of women to be, to be the victims of their gender. But it's equally men being victims of their gender.
True.
And the whole conversation around gender equality is really about allowing men and women to be who they really want to be. Because it's really not about men and women so much as it is about masculine and feminine qualities.
True.
I assign some qualities as masculine because they're seen more in men, and feminine qualities seen more in women. But a wholesome person is really a beautiful combination of both. And, the unfortunate part is that the minute a child is born, we put the child in blue and pink and say, you're a boy, you should be like this. You're a girl, you should be like this. And you push them to being more of living a scripted life, so to say. Yeah, you're a boy, here is your script, live by this. And that whole concept of being a man and all of that is just so strongly ingrained, and even more for men. Because in all of these gender equality conversations that we have, it's okay for men. It's okay for women to be like men. We look at them and say, so smart, she's kind of transcended and moved, and she's equal to any man. But we never take pride in a man being like a woman. Why not?
So true. So true.
Right? So how can we shift that and say, it's okay for men to be sensitive, caring, nurturing, all of that. Those are good qualities of a human being. right? So let's give them permission for that.
Yeah, and I think you made such a beautiful point about rather than gender, it's about qualities. And our body itself is a great example. Nature is a great example of how there is a balance between the two qualities. I'm going to shift a little gears here and come to the workplace directly. There is research which says there is a strong link between equality in society and equality at workplace. And I mean, the pandemic has also thrown that up. The research also brings, and how can, there are targets in companies. The D&I has become the flavor of the month. Every company is having a D&I report, D&I policy, etc., etc. And, and there are targets around hiring and promotions. I think they bring their own problems. With women thinking, really sometimes doubting whether was I given this job because I'm capable or because it was the gender thing, and men saying, is this fair? And you've been on both sides of the table in IBM, leading the agenda, and now in your own consultancy, driving this agenda, advising people. Some perspective on this will be good.
Yeah. On the face of it, it looks like, the minute you say there are targets set, everybody believes that meritocracy is going down the drain. Somewhere you're going to dilute the qualities required, etc. So that just comes along with the territory. Now, whether mandates are good or not, I think it works. Okay, so if we have established that women are important and their voices must be heard in decision-making forums, then we need to get them there. And to get them there, it might mean that you need to fast forward some of them. You need to, go out there and identify, because they have multiple challenges, which have stopped them. They've been historically disadvantaged in a lot of ways, so to say, right? And therefore, you need to bring them in. And any change, any social change has really happened only with mandates. I mean, take small things like smoking. We said smoking is bad for you. It kills you, it breaks, and we even put horrible pictures of, lungs on, eaten lungs on the pictures of, cigarette packs. Nothing happened. Appealing to the good sense of people is, doesn't really work, because people will continue to do what they're doing because they're comfortable with it. Very, very few will change. But the minute you put a mandate, sorry, let me just drink some water. The minute you put a mandate, everybody starts doing it, and then they start to see then we start to see the change, right? So when it comes to targets in organizations, I know the angst that happens. It's, there's just both men and women. The men feel that this is reverse discrimination. This really rightfully belonged to me, but I did not get it. But from an inclusion angle, this is a very acceptable social justice angle. You're trying to correct a past injustice. And for a period of time, you need to treat women not equally, but differentially, because there is this huge difference between equality and equity, which are important technical terms in a sense, so to say. And I very quickly explained what that is. It's not about treating everybody the same, because we all don't start from the same base. It's not a level playing field. So treating everybody the same does not give you the same outcomes. Some people need help, and that help needs to be given. Now, where I believe the problem comes from is that people tend to associate this affirmative action or target setting in organizations with the reservation that the government of India has. And then they kind of say, oh, this is going to go on forever. But the advice that we give companies typically is that it's a good way to get your numbers up, but have a sunset date to it. Say from 2020 to 2025, we are going to do what we can to get more women into leadership. We're going to try all of these different things, not reducing standards. It's just about helping women fast forward their skills, identifying them actively, encouraging them, and enabling them to succeed. That's really what we need, because over and over again, women keep talking about not having sufficient role models. They say we're not seeing women like us being successful. We want to see women, normal women, being successful with families, with kids, and older parents doing this. And then it kind of gives us a sense that we can also do it. So I am not fully against target setting. There are different ways in which you can look at it, but it's a good way to get your numbers up. Because if you look at the World Economic Forum, it says it will take over a century for us to get to gender equality in workplaces. It's a big battle that we are fighting. It's not a simple thing that's going to go away with a couple of conversations.
Yeah, so it's not just about the target, and I think there is a socializing angle to this. When we bring women here, we also need to have policies around supporting them to grow, because there are biases which already exist within the organization. So my next question is, what can organizations do to change, and what are some positives that the pandemic is providing? What is the platform that the pandemic is providing to organizations?
Okay. So I think there are sufficient policies, and there are a whole bunch of policies just on the internet even. Yeah, you can go, they are the easiest to implement.
Yeah, true.
What is really hard is how are you implementing these policies in practice? Are you making jokes about it? For example, take for example, I work in this space and we talk to companies about flexible working and stuff like that. And we had, even as early as March, this year, when we were having conversations, there were many companies that said impossible. There are some jobs that just cannot be done from home. Of course, there are some jobs that cannot be done, but they were referring to a lot of jobs that could be. And overnight, it has all become work from home, right? All of these people are working remotely and they are working productively. And at very low budgets, by the way. It's not like there was this big layout that was done and there was this whole logistics planning. It all happened overnight. So we are all resilient people. So I think once you say something needs to be done, we will work around it. Who thought about this, this virus impacting us in so many different ways? Personally, I even would dare to make the statement that the pandemic has done for inclusion what many, many initiatives have not done for the last 10, years.
I think so.
It really has brought, it has brought people together. We've suddenly realized what it means to be a global village. Okay, somebody catches a cold, I am catching it also, right? And this whole thing that we keep talking about, inclusive growth, inclusive banking, inclusive, everything is so true for us, because I cannot be healthy and comfortable if you have a cold. So I have to make sure that you are also healthy and you don't catch that cold, right?
So beautiful.
Which means we are, we have to help each other through this process. So all of this is being brought so starkly in front of us, saying that inclusion, which was a conversation, a good thing to do, we should all be inclusive, is suddenly going to impact my life, right? And this is very, very, very important for all of us to realize and reflect on, because these are not things that come to us suddenly. These come from conversation with people and talking to people, understanding that, everybody's welfare is important for me to feel comfortable and for it to be a sustainable organization or nation even.
So
right?
beautiful. So beautiful.
We just need to kind of understand and work with that. And I think the pandemic is doing all of that very nicely. It's not just for each other, it's for nature, inclusive. I'm just expanding that to, beyond people as well. So I think all of that is center stage now for us.
And I think if I can just add to your conversation, even the treatment is a level playing field. You wash your hands, wear your mask, everybody gets the same vaccine, you stand in queue so in a very, very different way, it has become an equalizer.
Absolutely. And like somebody pointed out to me, says, Nimi, on a Zoom call, we are all in the same size squares.
True.
Right?
True.
Right. So suddenly we are not in our big offices. We don't have all the, accessories to show where we are. It's just that little square inch on the screen, and that's what you need to make the most of.
So,
it's very interesting if you really think about it.
Yeah. I just want to bring up one more sensitive issue, which the research as well threw up about domestic violence. And this is not just, while Vaishnavi's report was very India-centric, but there is enough, reports available where this has now become a global phenomenon. And, somehow it seems that because of the strength and the masculine quality you have got the right to do that. I think if you can throw some light on it, and what can organizations do or have done, in your view, to support this aspect, which is usually hushed under the carpet. It is not the organization's business what's happening inside your four walls. Would be really nice.
Okay. Now, this is again a new conversation that has come up thanks to the pandemic. It has always again existed, but nobody has really spoken about it. But like I said, like it's unearthed some of these personal issues. This is also one of those things. And like you said, it's globally. In India as well, numbers have gone up in terms of domestic abuse. Now, for a lot of companies, initially they would say this is within the four walls of their homes. Who are we to get involved in that? Yeah. But today we are saying homes have become offices in a sense. So it's really important because it's impacting work, and companies are treading on this very slowly. There are very, very few companies that have started to talk about this. It's one of those new things that I believe will come into the picture. It is not about intervening and mediating between husband and wife and, you know, managing things on the home front, but it's more around saying the organization is available for support. Should you need us, we will help you get help, right? So if you need to go to the police station, for example, or you need a place to stay. It happened with a very close friend's sister, a very smart woman and everything, and she was in an abusive relationship. And don't ask me why we tolerate it. It's also coming from our socialization where, you know, you're made to put up with a lot of nonsense in a sense. Anyway, so here is this really smart young woman, and she was thrown out of home, and she really had no way to go. She called up HR, and they did a very, very nice thing. They said, we're not asking you any questions. You want help, we're giving it to you. Move into our guest house. They made a room available for her for 3 days till her parents were able to come and, you know, kind of make sense of what was going on. So that's the kind of help that organizations can give, because it is the lived reality for a lot of people. And when you said the workplaces, you know, women get out to work, workplaces, I believe, are actually a lot more fair and equal for women than their homes are.
Yeah.
Okay, in fact, that's one of the challenges. Many times, you know, you are whatever, this assertive, strong woman, you know, making decisions and giving orders, etc. And you come back home and you're suddenly asked to switch. Hey, now you have to be this obedient, subserving, you know, daughter-in-law or whatever else you're supposed to be. So women are, you know, and all of this places tremendous emotional burdens, which women have been handling very well. And I think some of these things are all being talked about, which, you know, women took in their stride. Women never talked about these things earlier, right? Even as a woman professional, I always thought personal issues were not to be discussed with anybody, because then you were seen as being less of a professional, right? So especially as a woman, you had to be even more careful. You had to pretend you didn't have a husband, child, mother, right? And because you were careful, because people were making judgments. Oh, you have a kid, so that means you're going to be distracted. So you were constantly working in the back, which means your memory space is being taken up by so many different things that, you know, personally, I think women are phenomenal creatures. You know, just by being a woman, you're something superior, because you just handled a lot more than an average male, I would think. I mean, while I agree that men have their own challenges, etc., this is not to, you know, take away from that, but just saying that women face a lot of issues which they may themselves not know. You know, and we are talking about privileged women like us who are in corporate settings and have the wherewithal to, you know, reach out for help, etc. But think about the layers below. Housemaids, for example, you know, they're all in, many of them in abusive relationships. You ask them to step out of it, they're like, how can you? You know, but they are coping with it. You know, like you said, the tribal women, urban women have learned how to cope. Now, like, for example, my maid wouldn't take her full salary. She would keep part of it with me because, you know, she to use for an emergency. So we started an account for her, and she said, no, don't give me an account. My husband will find out. You know, so they have all of, but they're learning to deal with it. So they're dealing with a lot more.
Yeah.
And, you know, with the pandemic, all of that is stronger because now you're out of a job. You don't have anything to do. You're being asked to do other things. So their anger is more. The usual stress busters of hanging out with the boys, you know, going out or sports, etc., which were stress busters for most men, is also not an avenue that's easily available, which then means, you know, it just translates many times with that closeness of being confined to a home 24/7, sometimes is not very healthy, right? when you're on vacation, you go, but it's fun. You're traveling, you're getting on an airplane or, on a train, whatever, you're going somewhere. There are things to distract you.
Yeah.
But when there are no distractions, the family is together, the vulnerabilities show up, and sometimes that leads to a lot of the ugly abuse and bad relationships that we tend to see now.
True, so true. And I think I've always maintained this, that women are more empowered at work than at home. So the shift in the empowerment has largely been economic, but the cultural piece has now come to the fore. It's like a volcano has just burst, and everything is right now there. Culturally, to see how we are bringing up children, what conversations, what textbooks, what media, everything has just come up, for discussion, which is amazing. I think in a way there's a level playing field. I have one more question, and then I will, maybe we can go to the Q&A. Is that any gender neutral advice for our coaches and how they can contribute? Because we've got the opportunity to work with corporates, one-on-one with men and women both. How can they contribute to the D&I agenda for both the individual and the organization? If you have any perspective. I saw that you were also a coach. So, how do you weave this conversation into the larger development agenda that we have with the coaching?
Yeah. So, I think everything should be gender neutral. The only real difference is when it comes to maternity. Other than that, I think men and women can be very similar in a lot of ways, because the physical strength is not such a requirement anymore in our world. Everything is automated. So the physical need for physical strength is not. So I think when it comes to corporates, other than maternity leave, I think everything else should be the same across the board. It should be parenting support. And that's, I think, one of the challenges, because I see organizations saying these policies are for women. When flexible working came into the picture, it was for women. So it was like, oh, women take, and when women take it, they're not serious about their careers. When you have visibly successful men using flexibility, and believe me, if you really think about it, almost all senior leaders work flexibly. Right? They're not in the office all the time. They're traveling, they're working from home, they're working from wherever, then they're delivering. So some of our most productive senior leaders are actually working flexibly, but we will not give the, junior person that, benefit. So again, all of this comes with conditions. It's not that everybody can work from home. There are people that may not be able to, they may need guidance. All of that is, considered. I'm saying that as a policy, it is, a lot of things can be done from home, especially with technology liberating us from, any particular workplace, right? So this has to be considered, and companies should also not look at policies as helping women, because that's like, oh, poor women, they need all the support that they can get kind of a thing. It is about enabling them. And this is about enabling any diverse person. A woman has a certain set of needs, a person with a disability has a certain set of needs, a person who's from the LGBT community needs a certain set of policies that will help. These are all enabling policies. A fabulous example that I often use, and which when I first heard made a great impact on me, was, many of us are on videos. How many of us are physically disabled in any manner? Would you just raise your hand so I get a sense?
I wear glasses, so I'm physically disabled.
Okay, very interesting, Ruby, because most people who wear glasses wouldn't consider themselves disabled, right? It doesn't come to you automatically, simply because by wearing glasses, you're as good as anybody else.
True.
Right? So it's not a disability anymore. If you didn't have those glasses, you would have a whole lot of problems. And it's not because you're not capable, it's because your need has not been accommodated for.
True.
Right? So in the same way, if you were to look at it, all the policies that are out there, it's enabling a woman to succeed. And if you think women are important for your business, and I completely believe it is, it's not just the politically right thing to do, it's a business imperative today, you need to do what it takes to retain them. So you can't pussyfoot around it saying, okay, we've taken women, but they don't stay. You see, they don't stay. They have all these commitments. No, they don't. Many of them leave because they are not being enabled. And it's not just in terms of policies. I mean, just last week, and since we are a bunch of coaches here, I'd like to talk about a situation that came up. A company called us and said, we'd like some support with a very senior woman leader who's doing really well, but she's been having some challenges with relationship, okay, which is a very common thing. Again, assertive women are just not liked and are seen as being a bother. And when we reached out to her, as we talked about it, there was nothing to coach her on, really. It was an interpersonal issue in the company that the general group was uncomfortable with her style. Okay, they needed the coaching, not her so much, really. So we went back to HR and said, look, we don't think there's a problem. And we spoke to 2-3 of the managers in the group, and they all agreed that she's a phenomenal performer. Okay, she was brought into the company only a year ago, and they said she's already delivered 5 years worth of whatever she's done. And she says, for me to deliver that, I get work done. I have pushed people out of their comfort zones. But show me one time when I have been rude or eroded anybody's dignity. I have not done that. I have only pushed them on work, but it's extremely uncomfortable that everywhere it's coming up as we need to coach her to be better. And she said, I'm not taking that feedback because you brought me in to make a change. I have made that change. So what I'm trying to say here is that there is need for all of us to even accept powerful women, strong women. Many times we don't know how to handle a high performing woman, right? Because we are used to seeing women in a certain template. And if you're not falling into that template, you're just not fitting in and you're a difficult person.
And I want to acknowledge you for one thing you just said. You actually could have taken that business on and that work on, but you stood and committed to the cause that you believe in, that there's really nothing wrong with it.
Absolutely.
And that is so wonderful, so wonderful. And I'm going to hand it over. I can see a lot of questions and Vaishnavi getting edgy. She sent me reminders. Vaishnavi, over to you. And I will come back. I have one last question for you, but I will come back after the Q&A.
Okay, sure.
So you can want to take a breather, maybe with a glass of sip of water or something.
Yeah, Vaishnavi.
Okay. So some of the questions that are arising, one, of course, I think Ruby shared about the cultural differences, whether it's a universal phenomenon. The other is about women empowering women. I'm going to club 2 questions which came. One is, women can also hold back women. What is your comment? And the other is, do we as corporate women do enough to lift other women colleagues? My observation is that it happens more in the lower strata of society than among corporate women. Any observations?
Okay. Yeah, this is something I've heard over and over again. And, gender is always a very dicey topic. Everybody has very strong opinions. It can get very emotional very fast, and the minute you say something, oh, but I know a man who's like this, and I also know that man, but you're talking about women in general and men in general. It's not about individuals, right? Our realities may be different, and which is probably why we are where we are, right? But there are a lot of people that it doesn't mean because it didn't happen to you, it's not happening to somebody else. So that's one thing to keep in mind, because gender is always a sensitive topic. So to your question that, whether women help each other, I think there is nothing that stops women from helping each other, but there is some research that has gone on around this, which says that, especially at senior levels, and I think you pointed that out as well, what tends to happen is there are so few women that when a promotion comes up, the women think they're competing with each other and not with the larger group, right? So there is a tendency to believe that. So if there are 10 men and 2 women that are vying for a particular position in the company, the 2 women are kind of looking out at each other and saying, okay, you're probably going to fight with me. They're forgetting that there are 10 other men that are also in the group. So there is that tendency. And what research around this says is that when you have equal numbers of men and women in the workplace, all of this will disappear, because we are human beings and there are human qualities that we all carry, but certain situations kind of trigger certain fears or vulnerabilities in us. And this whole thing of tokenism, which is so few women at the top, creates that sense of, I'm competing with you and I have to be one shade better than you if I need that promotion. And you forget that there is a larger context in which you are looking for it. So yes, and we are talking now about it. We are talking about, how it's very easy for men to kind of backslap each other and, talk about opportunities, etc. Today, as part of the work we do, we also create opportunities for women to come together. So some of our women's development programs, for example, are also designed in a way that they're interacting, because women don't interact as much because they're busy people. right? They have enough to do in their home front. So they finish their work and they run away. They don't network. And these are all things that are being challenges. And I'm sure, you do that in your programs as well, where you're telling them, stay together. And we have seen that work where women tell each other, hey, there's an opportunity that's opening up in my department. Would any of you like to, it was done intentionally, because by themselves, they may have, maybe she'll see it on the net. I don't have to inform. Right? So we are saying, take it on yourself, do that good deed of reaching out to somebody. And if you see a capable woman, push her out of her comfort zone. Because again, it's legendary that women underestimate themselves, right? We are constantly believing that we are a little less than what we are. If you see a woman, somebody did that very nicely for you, Vaishnavi, today when you said, I'm not good enough or something. And somebody said, no, you are, right? Can we affirm each other? And this is something we tell our managers as well. We say, look, if you see a smart woman who you believe has the potential, she may say, I'm not capable, I'm not ready, I'm not, I can't take this up just now. Push her out of her comfort zone and enable her to succeed. Now, that's what you can do as a manager. And that's where we meant to be allies for women's growth. Yeah. So, yes.
Very
women
nice.
are
Yeah.
increasingly supporting each other, and at lower levels, you have more women than in senior levels. So at senior levels, we are still seeing some of those challenges, but at lower levels, it's certainly easing out, and it will ease out the minute we have gender balance across the board.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That was really nicely put. The next question is, she said, Nimmi beautifully articulated about how the pandemic has encouraged progressive conversations in families. How can organizations encourage these dialogues and, more importantly, leverage this to narrow the gender gap?
Yeah, I think some of them have already started to do this. Now, it's a start. It needs to be sustained much after the pandemic is done. Today, like I was saying, today many companies are offering a lot of emotional well-being programs. There are a lot of things where they're together saying, just lighten the atmosphere. Let's do a few things together as families. Companies are doing this. Now, one would never have imagined all of this happening with organizations, but they're doing this very consciously, not just for their women, but also for their men. And I think that's the nice part. And they're saying, involve your families as well into this. So these are some of the things that they're doing. I don't see any particular policy that needs to be done for this. It's more around educating and sensitizing managers that these people are working from home. Again, another day there was this conversation where they said, women have to be more professional. It's, the kids come into the picture while the conversation is going on. We have to tell women that they should close the door. And I had a different point of view. I said, no, I don't think that is fair. You have invaded their homes. This is rightfully their place. So if you have moved in there, you better deal with some kid coming and putting its head on the screen, right? It's there. And as organizations, you need to accept that and not penalize the woman and say, you're not being professional, right? So can we have those conversations? And it's only when you explain to people these kinds of things that it matters. And it's so difficult because, again, women being the secondary person, the primary breadwinner, the one who's earning more, the one in a more senior position, like we discussed earlier, culturally, is our men. So when it comes to an important call that both of them have, the man gets the pride of place. I mean, whatever is the work desk goes to the man, and the woman has to make do with whichever other place she has. And I know people that actually take calls from their car. They actually get out of the house, go into their cars to take calls, important calls, saying, I don't want to be disturbed, right? So they are the ones that are still kind of running around accommodating for everybody. So once we start talking about this, men will start to see, and they'll say, okay, maybe I'll take a call from the car this time around. So they participate. It's many times women are not speaking up and telling people what they want, right? We just assume, and that's again one of those things that women are famous for. We just assume that everybody should understand our mind, right? So one of the things that I strongly encourage is to tell people what you want. Ambition is not wrong. Telling people I want to be this, and I want your help in, making me be this is also a good thing, right? So it's important for women to do that. And it's not so much the companies can enable by telling their managers to be more sensitive and all of that, but it's not as much policies as it is behaviors.
I'm glad you brought that up, ma'am, because it brings me to another question that came up very frequently in our survey, which was how can women ask or sensitize their managers and their teams without looking weak? Asking for policies, asking for support makes us seem weak. How can we do it without looking weak?
I don't think, women should feel that they're asking, if it's an enabler, if I'm saying, I just want to stay at home, and hang on a, what is it called, that hammock, that's probably not a right thing to be asking your boss. But if you're asking your boss for something that is a valid request, I think it should be accommodated. At least in today's environment, I would see managers being far more accepting of this, or in some way trying to enable it at least, right? I mean, I can imagine when I started work almost 37, 38 years ago, if you were 10 minutes late to work, you lost a half day's casual leave. Okay, we had this concept of casual leave and all of that, right? And today we are at a place where we are working from home and we dial in and, we are calling our bosses by their first names, etc. Things have come a really long way. And one of the other things that I see is making organizations do the right things, as I'm saying this, is also the fear of social media. Okay, now you do something unfair, it doesn't take very long for it to be talked about on social media. So people are being very mindful. Leaders are careful with what they're saying, the use of words, and they're just trying, and it's good. I mean, we will all make mistakes. None of us is ever going to be fully perfect, right? But the minute you realize I've made a mistake, apologize, move on, all of that is important, and telling managers you don't always have to be right. And today we are also in a place where, given the uncertainty, the VUCA world that we are in, etc., vulnerability is not seen as a bad thing, right? We're telling leaders, show your vulnerability, because then it shows you as human, and people will step in to fill that gap rather than you hiding it. Because at one point we always thought leaders must have all the answers. Today, for a leader to say, I don't have the answer, it is the wisdom of the crowd. My team has all the answers. It's my job to reach out to each of them to get their best ideas to create my solution, is how the leader needs to approach. Very different from how it used to be, right? So I think, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that helped. There's another question which is similar to the what we had discussed. How is sexual harassment affecting women at the workplace during the pandemic?
Okay. Again, very interesting. A lot of people said now that everybody is working from home, there will be no cases. We don't need our ICs. But guess what? It has come back in many different ways. We haven't seen as many written complaints yet, simply because people are figuring out what is the best way to go about it. But we are seeing a lot of complaints because everything that happens at workplace is continuing to happen digitally, virtually, in different ways. For example, I mean, the kinds of things that you will see on Zoom calls, somebody writing saying, oh, you're looking really pretty these days. I think the pandemic is suiting you, and staying at home has made your face glow, kind of. And these are comments that you're really not looking for, right? Or people saying that, and it's very easy for some of these inappropriate conversations to happen when you're working from home because you're by yourself, you're probably lying on your couch, you're in a very relaxed mood, you're in your pajamas and you're talking to a colleague. You may forget that this is office colleague and you may end up talking more personal stuff. The chances are higher than if you were in the office where it is more formal and you have a certain sense of what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. So we are seeing a lot of those kinds of issues, conversations that have gradually evolved into personal conversations where it should not have. People asking, can I see you on video at odd times, or saying, oh, I see that, are you married? Asking personal questions, which people feel is intrusive. Yeah, so the physical piece as well, we have heard of, we've done a couple of cases on the physical bit where people have gone into each other's homes to supposedly catch up on work and created issues. But a lot of the complaints are more in terms of, the virtual engagements, the conversations which are slightly going out of tune on a WhatsApp or whatever. You just feel you're alone, you're having a private conversation, but it's dangerous because digitally it can always be tracked. So what you said on WhatsApp or what you put on a text is very different from what you said, which can always be questioned. Did you really say it? Did anybody hear it? But when it's on text, it can always be pulled out. And so we do have issues. It's not gone down like we may have imagined.
I'll just take one more question before I hand it back to Ruby, because I remember she had a question. What is the one thing that you see as a glaring need even now?
In terms of?
Ma'am, would you like to take that? That came from Anita Gupta, our coach.
Oh, hi, Nimi.
Hi.
From the time that I worked with you a long time ago, I feel that there is a lot of positivity. Obviously, a lot of work has been done. And that makes me feel very good. But, you know, there are some things that are still really bother you. What is it that you see that would really has not yet been paid enough attention to?
I think it's the mindsets that we have to work on. And that's the harder one, right? Changing mindsets is never easy. It is about having to tug at people's heads and their hearts together for that mindset to change. It's a long process. Telling people just doesn't work, because then it would have been easy work, right? All of us as organizations do the easy things first, right? So we kind of, say, okay, let's look around and see which are the best practices. And then you go and pick the best practices and cut and paste them into your organization and say, okay, I've done this, I've done that, and I'm wondering why results haven't come. Results are not going to come until you change mindsets. And even without all these policies, small organizations which are inclusive, which are sensitive, are getting great results. And they don't have formal policies. It's just that they do what is the right thing to do. So I think policies are important. They give you a framework, they give you guidance, especially for large organizations. Yeah, so I think it's that bit that we're all working towards and very hard to crack. And I can tell you, around the globe, nobody has cracked it. We're all on a learning curve. We're all trying different things.
Thank you. I think that's answered, that's sort of validated what I was feeling, but I just wanted your opinion because you've been doing much more work in that domain while I'm doing some work with CFI on it and otherwise.
Sure.
Thank you.
Ruby, sorry, just one more question, just one last. I'll just close with that, I promise. It is with manpower rationalization exercise going on, is there any shift to adopt in our D&I approach apart from hiring consciously in future? I also want to club this with a few recurring questions from our survey, which is what are the future trends that this pandemic is going to create in women's employment? Are we going to see any shifts?
I am positive. You know, like I said, I feel this pandemic has done a world of good. There will be a lot of levers that will need to move along with it, because this gender inequality is not a one lever fix, right? There are many, many things that need to move. You need to have good policies. You need to have mindsets of not just organizations, but of individuals on the home front. On the for women themselves have to step up and, you know, learn a few things. Like today, technology has become terribly important, right? So you have to equip yourself to be able to work in the future world, right? So all of this has to work in tandem for us to be able to see a shift in this. And the 21st century is really redefining. Like you said, it's a moment where we are redefining a lot of things, how we work, how we have worked. You know, all of that is getting redefined, and this is a good opportunity for organizations. The fact that, you know, you can work from home means that you can reach out to people of much larger talent pool, right? So I could be sitting in Tirupur and working for Canada, which has also happened, you know, in the past, but it will happen a lot more. So now I can go wherever the people are. Right. So for a lot of women, because of marriage, you know, whatever, they could not move, etc. And we've lost people, right? Because of marriage, women have moved to a different city or whatever, today we can consider them working from home. It's opening up opportunities for people with disabilities. You know, they can't move around. It's allowing them to work from home. It's to me, I think this is a great opportunity for you to cast your net wider. If people are skilled, we've always looked at who's available, who's able to come to me as the group of people that we've chosen from. Now it really opens doors to a lot of non-traditional talent, if I may call it. Yeah, people that we would otherwise not have expected to be in the workplace.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Vaishnavi. Thanks, Nimi. Vaishnavi kind of took away my last question, which was about any closing remarks for, trends or something that we could do. It's been a very positive conversation, which is amazing. But any last remarks if you had?
Yeah, I think I will end it on a positive note because I feel it is a very positive space we are in right now. All the stars are aligned. I think it's a great time to be a woman in the workplace. There are many things that are going for you. Your companies are wanting to do the right things. The governments are pitching in, World Economic Forum, the UN. Everybody is saying, we need to do more. So I think this is a conversation that you cannot walk away from. Nobody can. And any right-thinking man is pulled into it. And I work in this space and I see the difference. What it used to be a few years ago to, and I can say right here that despite everybody saying this was an important topic, I have never had the year of the CEO and his or her first line until about 2 years ago. In the last 2 years, I have been able to talk to CEOs on their first line. Otherwise, a diversity and inclusion class, very important. I will send somebody to it. Okay, head of HR go, D&I leader go, somebody else go, but I do not have the time. So today we are saying as a leader, your face time is important. And it is not just to be a leader, it's all of us. And I think organizations, and it is my favorite thing, that I personally think I'm doing this, that I am bringing about social change through organizations. Okay, because organizations are very, very powerful vehicles of social change. If you are getting a captive group of men and women into a group and talking to them about inclusion and about how they need to be for a better world, hopefully their brains are not shrinking when they go back home. It is going to impact how they will relate to their family members, to a extended family member, to a neighbor maybe, right? So from that angle, this is slow, but it is happening, and I am convinced it's happening. So yeah, so I will end it on a positive note and say all the stars are aligned. We should make the best and the most of this situation that we are in. Yeah.
So beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for making such a complex and, multi-dimensional subject so interesting. I just have 2 lines on the closing, and I want to acknowledge everybody in this on this call, that outliers, men and women of the past, have paved the way for us to be who we are and live the way we want, or are we living the way we today? And it is for us to pave the way forward for the next generation. And I think COVID has come with a reset and a reevaluate button. So let's use it. And what we do today will determine the lives, our children will be able to lead. So every time we play big, I think we are laying a brick for the road ahead. So let's keep laying those bricks, and thank you for the opportunity. Vaishnavi, back to you.
Yeah. You like to go ahead?
Thank you, Nimi. Can you hear me?
I can.
It's a
Yeah,
bit faint.
thank you.
Maybe you can keep it.
Thank you. It was really wonderful to listen to you. If Gangapriya is there, a dear client, Gangapriya there, a quick word from you. I've been seeing your chat comments. Are you there? We have a very accomplished coach and dear friend, one of the few MCCs in the country, Harish Devarajan. Harish, a quick word from you.
Gangapriya's dropped out.
Harish, you're there. I can see. If you can unmute, a quick word from you. MVN Rao, who's been the leader of our Mumbai chapter and a great supporter and champion of CFI. MVN, Nana, quick word from you.
Awesome listening to Nimmi. I think her passion comes through, and she has been a great help to us in our own journey many times in many places. And I mean, the perspectives are fantastic. And I think I really loved some of those things, but I felt a little sad when you told me about World Economic Forum, things that take 100 more years, actually. It made me a little sad, but I tell you, yeah, whatever has happened in the 35 years, what I have seen in my work life, I think we have come a long way. And I'm sure, I think the next generations will take it even farther and make it a lot better workplaces as we go forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's always awesome listening to you.
Thank you, Nana. Harish?
Yeah, it was such a wonderful morning spent. Ruby, you did a fantastic job by getting Nimmi into her mood. And Nimmi, as usual, so passionate, so insightful, and really made us think of issues, challenges, and opportunities. I'm so delighted that I spent the morning with the two of you. And thanks Vaishnavi and CFI for putting all of this together. I think it's a great topic, wonderful speakers, enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Harish.
you.
Thanks. Is Gangapriya there? No.
So she had, I think she's dropped out.
All right. Okay. So I just am going to take hold on, request you all to hold on for just 2 more minutes. No better opportunity than this. CFI has been running a program called She Leads, which is really a program for mid-level women who are in mid-senior management to stay on in the game and raise to levels of leadership. In the wake of the pandemic, we felt we needed to do much more fundamental work. So we went back to the drawing board, redesigned the program, and we are about to launch what we call She Leads Special. And She Leads Special is a program that focuses essentially on life skills, you know. And I really like this definition of UNICEF and the World Health Organization have said as abilities for adaptive and positive behavior that enable individuals to deal effectively with the demands and challenges of everyday life. So they say it's not so much the technical abilities, but the life skills that will become important. And as we place demands on the environment and women, we believe that focusing on life skills will help women take care of themselves, claim their space, and be successful. So that's the context in which we are launching She Leads Special. So if you move on, Vaishnavi, it's really to equip women with the requisite skills and strategies to stay in the game, critical skills, one-on-one web-based coaching, and a safe space to share and reflect on challenges. So CFI, of course, whatever we do, coaching is at the very heart, and we hope this will be of very great value. What we feel good about is that we've really dropped the price of the program by almost 50% so that we are able to reach and benefit a large number of women in organizations. And we do hope organizations take the initiative and support and sponsor women for this program. So that's really what I am delighted to announce. So the program actually starts on 5th of November and goes on till about January with some assessment, feedback, and coaching sessions. And I really hope that we are able to reach as many people as possible and help them benefit from this. So that's really She Leads Special. No better opportunity than today to really announce and get the blessings and the best wishes from Nimmi and all of you who are there on the call. Nimmi, thanks once again.
Most
Fantastic.
welcome.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
To be engaging with you, especially because you and I were batchmates at Excel.
True.
And so was MVN. And Harish just one batch away. So little alumni stuff going on here. Thanks so much, Amy. Thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks everybody for taking time off. It's a bit of an odd time, but we took the chance and we had at one time over 75, 77 people registered. So really, really appreciate taking the time and choosing to be here. Thanks to all our coaches, thanks to our clients, thanks to our chapter leaders. Ruby, special thanks to you for being a fantastic moderator, and Vaishnavi, thanks for pulling it all together.
Yep.
Thank
Vaishnavi,
you.
yeah, very good job.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Ruby.
Thanks a
It's
lot.
lovely interacting with you. And
Thanks, Suresh,
thanks,
our
everyone.
CEO,
Thanks,
for our
Nimmi.
support.
See you. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thanks, Suresh.
Vaishnavi.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Suresh, bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.